Hello, friends. You are listening to the Aligned Birth podcast. Typically, there's two hosts on the show. So there's Doula Rachel, and then there's me, Dr. Shannon, Prenatal Chiropractor. Today, you've just got me, but that also means that it is an interview day. And so, you know me, you've listened to the show, you know how much I love these. And we have Dr. Danielle Drobbin on the show today. And she is also an Atlanta area prenatal pediatric chiropractor. I'm also going to throw in powerhouse in there. She and I were just chatting before the show. I'm going to call her a powerhouse. She didn't call herself that, but I'm calling her that. So we'll get to that in a minute. But we're going to talk about, obviously, we're going to talk about prenatal chiropractic care because that's what we both deal with, daily in our jobs. And it deserves a space and needs to be talked about. But we're going to go a little bit more in depth with it too, because she's writing a book. What? She's writing a book and it's called Birth Brain. And I want to know all the things about it. Like, why is it written? What are the chapters? Who is it for? Where did it come from? What was this birthed from? And, why the birthing community needs this book. So we're chatting about that today on the show, but we got to get there. So we'll go through her background and stuff too.
Welcome to the Aligned Birth Podcast. I'm Dr. Shannon, a prenatal chiropractor.
And I'm Rachel, a birth doula and childbirth educator. Together, we're here to bring you conversations about pregnancy, birth, and motherhood. From cesarean to VBAC, hospital to home births, we've experienced it all. We are high school friends who reconnected through our shared passion for health and birth. As moms to two young boys, we've both changed careers after our own transformative childbirth experiences.
Join us as we discuss the importance of a healthy body and mind throughout pregnancy, birth, and into motherhood. Our goal is to provide fun, interesting, and helpful conversations and interviews that inspire learning. When your body, mind, and intuition are aligned, you can conquer anything.
Sit back and relax, or grab a notebook and take some notes, or maybe listen as you enjoy a walk. However you choose to listen, we hope you enjoy this episode of the Aligned Birth Podcast. Before we get into the episode today, if you enjoy the content of this podcast, we would greatly appreciate your support in one of three ways. First, leave us a review or give us a 5-star rating. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and make a bigger impact. Second, you can sign up for our newsletter. By doing so, you'll be the first to receive new episodes and exclusive bonus resources straight to your inbox each week. Lastly, you can become a direct listener supporter. Running this podcast requires significant time, effort, and resources. Your contribution, no matter the amount, helps us continue providing valuable content to a wider audience. Simply use the links in the show notes to make your donation, sign up for our newsletter, or leave us a review. Every contribution matters and is sincerely appreciated. If the Aligned Birth Podcast is a part of your weekly routine and you love what we are doing, please consider supporting us through one of these three options. Your support will create a ripple effect, allowing us to reach more listeners and make a lasting difference.
So I do want to give you a little bit of insight into who Dr. Danielle is, but she grew up in Long Island. And her dad is a chiropractor, has been a chiropractor for 30 years. She went to the she went to Life University here in the Atlanta area. And so she has her doctorate from there. And then she went through extra education for pediatric care. So she has her CACCP, DACCP, so certification and diplomate and working with pediatric patients. But she's also Webster certified as well too, so through ICPA. She and her family, wife Dawn, they have 4 children and they live there in the metro Atlanta area. She serves as a chiropractor with only the intention to give. And in her own words, she says, "I know that I was put on this earth to be a chiropractor and affect as many lives as possible through the power of love and touch." So welcome to the show today, Dr. Danielle.
Thank you for having me. It's very nice things you said about me. Thank you for saying them.
Yes. No, she's definitely a powerhouse. I feel like I've stalked you on Instagram and I've known you in the, chiropractic world for so long. And when I was in school, I looked up to you. I still look up to you. because you would always come and speak to students at Life and just really, I don't know, you give. You love to inspire and help others. And so we had actually I don't know if it was when we first met, but we had, ICPA had done something at Life recently where they were trying to get students and doctors together. And I saw the speaker lineup and I was like, oh, Dr. Danielle speaking. I love that. I love hearing her speak because sometimes I call it your New York comes out. Like, I love that. It's like, it's the passion. I should probably call it passion, but I call it the New York.
Detriment sometimes, but yes, sometimes good, sometimes bad.
The New York comes out. And so you were so passionate and you were talking about this book. And I was like, I've got to have her on the show and talk about this book. So, and here we are.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes. Thank you.
It's happening.
Thank you. It is happening. It's all happening. Yes.
It's all happening.
But
so you're a chiropractor.
Yeah.
And your dad was a chiropractor. So that kind of explains a bit of like how you were introduced into the field and the lifestyle, but why prenatal? Why pediatric? How did that come about?
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up with a dad that's a chiropractor, we're definitely more on the holistic side of how we lived our life and how we treated our bodies. And just I think the core of it is having faith within your body, right? And having faith that your body is an innate, intelligent being. It can regulate, it can heal. A lot of times we come from a fear-based place with that, and we may make fear-based decisions rather than faith-based decisions. And I always like to say that, you can walk in fear or you can walk in faith, and you can't walk in both at the same time. So you got to choose one. And I've been put in many situations in my life where I had to choose one, and fear would have been a very easy one to choose. However, when I chose faith, everything worked out the way exactly it was supposed to work out. And whether it has to do with your healthcare or just your life. But definitely growing up with that as a core value, I think regardless of what chiropractic is, that was very much instilled in me through chiropractic. But yeah, I mean, we just grew up super holistic. My last sibling was birthed at home, and I was 12 years older than my sister, so 11 years older, and so I was the doula for my mom at our home birth when I was 11, and so it was me and the midwives. Yeah, that was kind of like cool. And so I'm 11 years old, and my mom's like giving birth in her bedroom, and I just remember, going through the process with her and holding her hand and giving her ice chips, and she asked for a gun at one point, and I was like, that's kind of weird, but I didn't give her the gun. Gave her the ice chips, and and my sister started coming out, and I remember her head popped out, and I supported her head and with my dad, and we caught her as my mom was birthing her, and then I cut the umbilical cord, and I just remember like being 11, and I was like, that is like, I mean, it was just really amazing to watch that, right? The faith in the body again, to do a natural normal process. And I just knew at that point that I was definitely going to be a part of prenatal something. Like, I didn't know what I was going to do at 11, but at that point. So then like fast forward, here I am in Atlanta, and I go to chiropractic school, and having 4 kids, obviously it just was a natural way for me to move into the pregnancy pediatric world. So
yeah, no, most definitely. Now, and towards the end, I'll have you share kind of, okay, where's your office and that type of thing. So as you go through school, get your CACCP, DACCP, and work then in this prenatal pediatric space, what are some of the things that you notice, or what are some things that you do wish people knew about prenatal care, but also pediatric chiropractic care? Because I feel like there's still a lot of education that we have to do in the community.
I mean, there's a lot of things I wish people knew, but from the basics and the standpoint, I mean, what we do is not, some people come in, they say, my partner doesn't believe in chiropractic, this and that. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's not a religion, it's a science, right? The first page of every Gray's Anatomy book that every doctor, whether it's medical, allopathic doctor, chiropractic doctor, the first page of every Gray's Anatomy book is the central nervous system. And so I think what falls short is that chiropractors are mostly known for back pain, neck pain, car accidents. And really it's about neurological function, nervous system connection and function. And these nervous system pathways and nerves control and coordinate every single function of your body. So, just yesterday I had a kid come in that's been suffering with a cough since May, a really bad cough since May. And what are we in September? So we're talking 4 months. And when the mom comes in, she has tried every medication there is, every natural remedy there is. She's been to an allergist. She's been to an internist. She's been to everything. The cough has only gotten worse. And so her postpartum doula, she just had another baby, actually said, oh, what, have you tried the chiropractor? And she just totally forgot because she had been my patient a long time ago. Anyway, she brought the kid in. But we're like, so many times we're the last resort. When you want to get a better lung function to allow that cough to leave the body, because that's what his body's trying to do, we got to make sure the connection to the lungs are working right instead of just trying to fix it from an outside-in perspective. So I think just remembering that your brain, your spinal cord, and your nerves control and coordinate not just one thing, not just two things, but like everything, that maybe we start from that foundation and work our way out when drugs and surgery are needed, when other things are needed, but make sure that foundation is clear and connected to start with. And so many times when we're the last resort, I think about the money, the time, the suffering that could have been saved if maybe we were like 3 steps earlier, or the first step.
No, I totally, everything that you said, I agree. And that's why I wanted you to kind of go through that. Mm-hmm.
Well, and not even that, just if I could piggyback on the prenatal side of things too, because from a prenatal standpoint, and of course we're talking symptomatic, but like, what is it like to just like have like a healthy kid, right? What does it mean to just have a great normal pregnancy or and have a good birth, without any sort of like, intervention? And what does it mean to just like kind of live in a way that's just more normal, forget natural, just like normal. And so I wish people would think about us on a proactive preventative side and not just in a reactive side at the same time.
Most definitely. Yeah. And sometimes that's a hard space to get into, and I know you do a lot of education in your office too, and you're constantly talking about those things. I mean, I know even on my run this morning, that's what I was thinking of partly. I was thinking of nervous system regulation. Yeah. Like, why do we wait so long to come in when there's issues or even before there's issues?
Right.
I know. It's part of the journey.
When the baby's breech. What about keeping the baby not breech? It's like, why are we just in this reactive society? But that is our society, and our culture is very reactive. So, you have to push to be in a more proactive and educate yourself to be in a more proactive model.
Now, I think that's really fun that you shared about your first experience with birth at 11. And so then knowing, okay, I'm going to do something in this field. So now, fast forward to getting through all of school and your diplomate, which is not something to just be glossed over. So I do want to acknowledge that because that's a lot of work. So how did chiropractic care, or even just your knowledge, how did that impact your family and your partner's birth and that whole thing? Like, was it also just as impactful as when you were young, or was it
totally?
Yeah.
I mean, well, and if you think about it, you're like, it's so easy for me to say, like, let your kids' fever run. It's so easy for me to say, get adjusted while you're pregnant to prevent breech presentation. But then, so my wife birthed all 4 of our children. She had 3 births, 2 singles and 1 twin birth was our last birth. And like, but when you're in it, it's a different story, right? And maybe sometimes that faith can waver, right? And so with our first, we had a normal or natural water birth. And, we chose our providers with, we interviewed our providers, right? We're the employers and these people are our employees. And I'm paying the bills and I get to choose who I want to be part of my village. And I want to make sure that people are congruent and on board with what we want for our birth. We never know that it's going to go that way or not, but I want to set ourselves up.
You want to set yourself up for success. Exactly.
Totally. And so we, our first birth was a natural water birth. I remember she looked at our provider, our midwife, and my wife said to her, do you want to check me? Do you think I should like push? And the fact that our midwife, Anjali, who's the most amazing midwife, just
Uh-huh.
looked at her like this. And we have a picture, just her looking. She goes, if you think you need to push, maybe you should. And she didn't check her. And she just allowed her to listen to her body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our second
Gave her
birth was in the
space.
car. So,
Okay.
yeah, our second birth was on the side of the road. She had precipitous labor. And so it was just my wife and we pulled over and she pushed a baby out on the side of
like, here we go
Briarcliff,
again.
and I caught that baby. And I was like,
You caught that
second birth with just me and her. But at that moment, right, I remember I was either going to be in fearful or faithful in that moment when that baby's head was coming out. And I remember choosing faith, purposely having to choose that faith because it was scary as all you know what when it's just you and your wife on the side of the road. And then our last twin birth, we really were, because now we're considered high risk and she was older. And so we really had to put a lot of what's going to be in my book into plan and effect to make sure that we were setting ourselves up for success in a framed high risk situation.
Right. And high risk being as soon as, the calendar turns, you're all of a sudden advanced maternal age. And
right.
It's like, well, maybe that's, no.
Right. I would prefer the term higher risk, and then we can see exactly what those numbers are.
And what the numbers are. Okay. Yeah. So that leads us into, let's talk about the book. Because you said the last birth with your wife, the book, you said this last birth that she had that really, it sounds like there are going to be chapters in there that's kind of outlining or these were the steps, or this is what you can do to impact your birth and empower your birth experience. I don't know. Tell me about the book.
So it's funny. The book has evolved. It's so crazy that I'm writing a book. I just want you to know that I have no idea what I'm doing. And I have people supporting me in this process because I definitely could not do it on my own. Like I said, I barely read books, much less write books. But I have this burning thing inside of me that I need to bring education at a higher level of thinking to the birthing world because our birthing world is failing us. And our maternal mortality rates are up 40%, highest, as we know, in Black and Hispanic women. And it is devastating. And nobody's talking about why we have this great healthcare system, yet our maternal mortality rates are up 40%. Does anybody want to talk about that? So it's very infuriating and frustrating. And even if there isn't a mortality outcome, there still are poor mental health outcomes. There are still more interventions being used that are at unhealthy and risky rates, according to ACOG. So I just really mind boggles me why we're not talking about any of this. And so so in my book, it's actually what I thought I was going to be doing was writing here's what you can choose. Some, week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I'm actually implementing a way of thinking, and I want to teach birthing individuals how to think and how to think objectively in uncertain and fearful times. And so it's called Decision Science, which is actually Harvard has a bunch of classes on it, and it's an actual thing. I didn't realize that how I think is an actual, there's a term. And so there's a term for how I think. And it's really a book on how to teach birthing individuals how to think, to have their desired outcome in steps and stages.
In steps and stages. Okay. So give me some insight into because that's interesting how it's evolved from what you were thinking as more of a week 1, week 2, almost that aspect of the, the cruddy, what to expect when you're expecting, but not that.
Yes.
But you're kind of shifting it on its axis because that's what the community needs. It's how to think. It's that reverse engineering. So what do some of the chapters sound like?
So I think, when I think about my own personal practice and how many, birthing individuals I take care of on a daily basis, because we have a really big high volume practice. And when I have patients that come in and they want a vaginal birth, I know where they're going to birth. And let's say this said hospital has a 46% C-section rate. Well, just in general, but they don't know that, right? So according to ACOG, what is it? Anything over like 30% is actually like deadly, risky,
red flag.
It shouldn't be. Yeah, red flags. Yet our hospitals here in Georgia, many of them are in the 40%. So you're going into a hospital, you want a vaginal birth, but you're going into a hospital that has almost 50% C-section rate. Why even from that point, right? So anyway, we move through. I support them. I don't want to impose any of my thoughts or feelings. I want people, we could read the same research, me and somebody else, and they could choose to have a induction or a C-section. I could choose not to, right? Based on the same research. It's just about like our personal risk assessment. And so I end up having a lot of women that have intervention and outcomes that they didn't want. And so I think, so part of what I'm doing is trying to educate on how to think about, okay, why don't we think about our personal values? So taking a trimester, we'll do a preconception section, first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, and postpartum, like in the first 48. But thinking about and identifying your personal, like key health values, right? I may be more holistic and somebody else might not be more holistic. That's okay. So they may be cool with having a little bit of intervention. Awesome. But like, let's know that what that could lead to, right? Evaluating like your past medical decisions. So really finding your personal values, I think is very important. Again, it's not going to be a book on having like a natural birth. It's going to be because, again, just because I feel a certain way or I want something for my own personal body doesn't mean that somebody else wants the same thing. And I need to support them in what they want. But maybe they want an epidural, but they don't want a C-section. Or maybe there are times and ways to have epidurals, right? And turn it low when you're about to push so you can really feel what's going on. So I think, anyway, but so we'd go through like personal health values, analysis of like key factors, like systematic analysis, identifying different options, and then putting them into like risk benefit analysis to see the risk benefit, whether it's if you're worried about cost, health, mortality, and then implementing your final decision and feeling good, feeling adaptable, and being able to move in different directions if needed. But, just being able to really go through that whole process and making a good, solid decision that you feel good about. Because I don't know if you know, but statistically, people spend more time researching a car they're going to buy than birth and beyond. So.
And we've talked a lot on the show too, how your birth experience is important. Like it plays a part, because I think it plays such a big part in that postpartum for you and how you navigate that. And so it really, yes, we all want healthy mom, healthy baby. Because sometimes Rachel and I talk about on the show and we get really tired of like, well, I just want a healthy baby. Okay, yes. Obviously, we all want that.
Right. That's like
not
the
what
unspoken.
we're arguing here. Yeah.
Right.
It's more of, but could it be more? And what are the things that you could do to set yourself up for success with that? And it doesn't, birth is unpredictable. So again, too, there's no guarantees, but you can at least feel at the end of the day that like, you know what? I did my research. I made these decisions based on what I read, what I looked at, and it sounds a little bit like that book is going to be, it's probably helping people move into that faith versus fear with decision making. It's kind of like it lays that out for you.
And empowerment. And to what you said that point, I think that this is what has been happening is that not only am I listening to these women tell me that my body failed me. So so they come in, so let's say they're on their second baby and they've had their first and ended up in a C-section. Why did it end up in a C-section? Well, there were 41 weeks. Hospital policy, my provider policy is I get induced at 41 weeks. So that's the policy. So they get induced at 41 weeks. They induced something their body wasn't ready for. And so it didn't move in a natural progression like it should. And, whatever happens, they ended up with a C-section. Your body didn't fail you. The medical system failed you. It's very simple. And then now this mommy, that I was talking to the other day has, really couldn't nurse because with higher C-section rates, you have a harder chance nursing with the baby. So didn't nurse. So then feeling like a failure, having postpartum depression, not connecting with her baby. And so when you go through all of these things, forget about health, but even just the emotional connection. Now, what is that for that mommy and baby? What is that for the baby? And that connection that baby isn't having with their mommy. And I think it's just such a bigger cascade effect, like to your point, than just healthy mommy, healthy baby. What that's going to be part of the book is, what does that really mean? Like, are we just talking that you're like alive?
Yeah. And that's what it sounds like when I hear moms or, anybody else say that, if someone did have a cesarean, they didn't end up, that they didn't necessarily want. I remember hearing that because my first was cesarean. I had the cascade of interventions as well too. I had that. But when I looked back on it and went through more, I was like, I think there was a lot of fear.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the chiropractic mindset yet, but also I just had a lot of things to unpack. And I think there was a lot of fear. So when you hear that, it's almost like that. Yes. What does it mean for healthy mom, healthy baby? You just survived.
Right.
I don't want to just survive.
I want to thrive. I want to thrive. And you know what? If I had to have a C-section, I want to know that I was part of that decision making. I want to know that I went into it, empowered, and that it wasn't just done to me, right? It was done with me. And
that's huge.
And think about, even if the result was the same, what a different mental space that birthing individual could be in postpartum with their baby, right? And with themselves at the end of the day.
I have had moms who have experienced that. We're wanting the VBAC. We're doing everything that we can. We've got that birth support team lined up there. And I mean, it doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen. And I had one mom and she came in for postpartum and she's like, I still feel really good with my decision though. She's like, I tried for it and I really did all the things I thought I could do. For whatever reason, baby was, just not going to be born naturally, but her approach that afterwards, I thought spoke volumes for her and for bonding with the baby as well.
Totally.
Too.
And so, to that same point, yes. Right. And so she had the same result, but a different experience postpartum because she was so educated throughout the process and powerful. Right.
That education is very powerful.
Yep. So I totally hear that.
So who is this book for? Is it only for people who are pregnant, labor birth, or do you see a wider audience for it as well?
Number one, I hope that it could be for the first time moms. It's going to be for everybody, right? But I think, your second time mom, after you go through it, what questions to ask. Your hindsight is 20/20 all day long. But the higher level of thinking, my hope, we're going to start with, prenatal, birth and postpartum, perinatal. But my hope is that way of thinking can be implemented now when you have your child and pediatrician visits and, when you have sicknesses run through your house. Or even just making medical decisions in general.
I had a doula on Milen just recently, and she's Harmony Birth Atlanta, and she teaches hypnobabies. And it was beautiful to hear her talk about the steps and stages of hypnobabies and what it is. And then she mentioned how she used some of those tools throughout her life. She's like, dude, I dealt with this with, situations with health issues with her mom. And she's like, okay, I just recentered. And so it sounds like it's kind of the same thing with this book, to transcend and how we make decisions and almost kind of giving you that recentering. Okay. Yeah. Where do I go from here?
Yeah. I mean, I was even thinking about it. I was like, oh man, what if I'm in a fight with my wife one time? And I'm like, okay, risk benefit. All right. If I do this, is it gonna, what's my risk? What's my benefit? What if I just don't do any? Should I not do anything? Should I wait 30 minutes and then decide? Am I making an emotional decision? Am I gonna, right? So it's I feel like you can really, I could save a lot of fights, a lot of poor medical decision making and relationship decision making. But yeah.
Birth brain and beyond. There you go.
Yes.
There's lots of other things there.
And no divorce. That's what it's going to be called.
And no divorce. Keeping those couples together.
Yeah.
So what has this writing process been like for you though? And how has it impacted you?
Yeah.
And how you approach care? Mm-hmm.
Oof. So I think that the writing process has actually I've been a little bit more, I guess, when people come into my office, I think that as parents, we feel judged. We judge ourselves, and then we continually feel judgment, right? And so that's one of our core values in our office is, no judgment. And so we never want to have judgment on anybody, and I never want anybody to feel that. However, I do want to support. And so I think that where I would maybe like hold my tongue sometimes, I am asking permission if I can provide some thoughts and things for them to think about a little bit more often. I just had somebody switch to a different practice because for that mere reason, if she wanted a natural birth and she was going somewhere with a 46% C-section rate, and she goes, "Did you know that?" I said, "I did. That's why I thought you should look into it." So, and she switched to a midwifery group that has a 17% C-section rate, right? So, so I think I'm just, I'm not biting my tongue as much. I think that I never want to be overly, I guess, aggressive in my thoughts or my communication. And that's something that I personally have to work on knowing that I'm not like that. But sometimes I think I might be like that with my New Yorker in me. So it's really been, it's scary. It's really scary because I think I'm going against the grain a little bit, but it's really empowering. And I know in my office, I can adjust one spine at a time, but maybe with a book, I can impact more people on a greater scale. So,
and that was kind of even our hope with this podcast too, because Rachel and I would just meet up and we would walk and just talk about things. And it was we should be talking about these things and people should hear it.
Yeah, right. And people want to hear it.
And people want to hear it. And so it's kind of the same thing. It's just that ripple effect of, yes, you can only adjust the one spine, but maybe someone researches the hospitals that they are in their area to birth at. And what goes into that decision-making process.
Yep.
Because that sounds like it's like the education, because that's how you can make informed decisions too, is coming from that point of education.
Yep. And learning how to
research.
Right. And learning how to read the research. Right. So, because I know it doesn't mean other people know it. And so I feel like it's almost a disservice for me not to write it. I hired a ghostwriter to help me because, again, I'm not good at writing. So I need to have verbal diarrhea and then somebody make it sound good. And she has just been so amazing. I can't even tell you. She's so on board and on mission. And her name is Jackie Walling, and she's really great. And so she's been a huge breath to this book.
So where are you at in the writing process?
Yep. So we did our first chapter, and then, so I have apparently there's all these things. And so I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about these things or not, but again, authenticity is my highest core value. So here I am. Okay. So you can self-publish, you could get published, you could, right? Do hybrids. I don't really know. Again, I have a team, right? So things have been happening in a way in this book that are just pushing me in a certain direction. And so I have a book agent. And so we have to write a complete overview of the book, and we have to do a book proposal, and then she's going to shop it out to try to get published, which is wild. So
that's so cool.
And the way that she came into my life was crazy and awesome. So it's just all supposed to be, I'm just having
You're just here for the ride.
I'll just ride on the wave, man. I don't know, but it's going that direction and I have to go with it. I have to go with it. It's not something I'm trying to make money on. It's just, I'm spending money to do it. I got to do it. I got to do it.
Yeah. What is one of your big goals with the book? I know we talked about kind of transcending that birth and that birth process, and so that it goes into people using those decision-making tools
Yep.
as well. But anything else with the book that like with certain chapters or things that really speak to you?
I mean, yeah, I mean, for sure. I think my favorite well, I think actually probably one of the beginning chapters, assessing your personal values, I think is huge. And when people can really get in tune with that and know what they're looking for, how comfortable they feel with certain outcomes or interventions, I think that's really important, because sometimes people might realize they're not comfortable, or they are comfortable, or they're a control freak, or they just want like a total wild like birth. So I think that's really important. And then we have a section, the last trimester, and it's like, I almost want to think about it as like a big red stop sign, like stop. Let's make sure the ducks are in a row. Let's make sure you got all your people in place. Let's make sure you have like your village to support you now, during, and post. Let's just now it's like you've been preparing, you're in your marathon, and it's those last couple miles, and we've just got to really make sure that we're ready to go. And so that's when all these different decisions and game time decisions are going to come into place, right? And so I think that's going to be a really important chapter. Just like these game time, like what can come up and what questions to ask and how not to make like rash decisions. And maybe you could be a part of that decision-making process for whatever the result is. And it's not done to you, it's done with you.
And I've often said, it's been teased out as, you share your birth story and things. It's kind of like, okay, what's the real feeling from that birth? What are we teasing out? And mine was very much that, like, I felt like everything was happening to me, and I was not an active participant.
Right.
And I think because sometimes birth, I mean, you've got to get to that point where you surrender, right?
Right.
So there's that aspect too, but it's that there's a difference there. I think there's a difference between surrendering into the birth and then you're surrendering into maybe a medical management of birth. I don't know, but
and so I know this is I think what gets me in my soul, in my heart and in my soul, is that being pregnant and making a human being is so incredibly powerful, right? How incredible. Like, you could have help to conceive. We're a lesbian couple. We didn't get pregnant on our own, right? We needed some sort of help to get us pregnant. However, once you are pregnant, once that embryo is there, it divides, cells divide and create life. And it creates eyeballs and kidneys and liver. And this is like, how incredibly powerful is that, right? Yet when we get to this process of birthing this baby, or even prenatally throughout, it is like, you are not powerful. You don't know any better than that innate intelligence that is creating, some liver cells right now. And you don't know it. So then a woman or a birthing individual is then sometimes, right, completely numbed to what's going on in their body, strapped down, cut open. If there could be anything that in my brain is like so powerless during the most powerful moment of your life, isn't that just so wild? And this is why I get enraged in the inside. It's like, no, you're not powerful. You are so powerful. You're the most powerful you've ever been. You are going to birth a baby. Like, you are so incredibly powerful. And we need to be pushing into that and leaning into that instead of just getting stripped of their power. It's so upsetting to me. That's my driving force, right? Like, sorry. I could go on.
There it comes. There it comes.
It's coming out.
It's coming out. This is why we love Dr. Danielle. Oh, there you go.
Already did that.
I love it. See, this is why we love you. But I'm so excited for this book. Is there anything like interactive in it, as far as, like tables, worksheets or something? Like, you read it, but sometimes I'm a real big, like, I love little self-help books every once in a while. Sure. And then, like, do I do anything with it? Like, do I? Right. So is there something with it?
Yes. So also what I've learned about books is that, and book writing, is that if you think about the actual paper of a book is very light and flimsy. So you either have like a book that you read or a workbook, right? If you think about the paper quality. And so I would like to have a side like workbook or like a little pocket like book that you could like bring with you to your visits. And I would like to have tables. So there's going to be tables where you could put like benefit risk. You could actually put in numbers and percentages. So, even in my life, I make decisions. I go pro con, and I'm like, oh man, that con list is like all the way down here, and the
Who
pro
knew?
is one here. Like I obviously shouldn't do it,
Yeah.
So I'd like to have tables, and then also I want, because framing is crazy. You could say you have a 1% chance of not winning the lottery, or a 99% chance of winning the lottery. And I'm like, well, I'm definitely going to play the lottery. So it's just the way that you can frame certain things. And so I'd like to actually show tables of like the risk assessment, right? So high risk, you're, over 36 or whatever. And that could be like a tiny sliver. It could be like a 1% higher, or a VBAC, could be whatever percentage it is. If it's a 2%, 3%, okay, but now you have a 97% chance of success, right? Where your risk is 2% higher, or even less than a 1%. So I want to have tables like that as well, so we can actually see and, demystify
it's like, don't forget
framing.
the other side of the equation, like, yes, that seems very medically minded management of putting that information out, because it is very fear-based, but what's the other side of the equation?
Right.
How often does it end up successfully? Yeah.
Right. And so, you show me 3% or 97%, I'm most likely going to choose the 97%, whatever that is.
When you helped birth your baby in the car, and you
Catch my baby, because my wife birthed.
That's right. So she birthed the baby.
I can't take any credit for that. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for catching that. How did you, because you mentioned, because I wrote a little note here. I always take notes while I do interviews because I wanted to touch back on this, but you said you had to choose faith. So what was one thing you did in that moment that helped you to choose that, when you were kind of balancing between the two?
So just so you know, she had her first contraction, and then the baby was out in our hands 45 minutes later. Okay. And I actually drove from my office home in that time frame. So there wasn't a lot of like thinking happening. But when she said, pull over, the baby's head is coming out, and I was like, oh, okay. So I pulled over into Briarcliff apartment complex parking lot. And I ran into the back, and she was in a, awesome powerhouse birthing position, one leg down, one knee up. And the head was, coming in and out. And I said, can you curse on podcast? I don't know. But I said,
we can put a little.
Yeah. I said, holy, whatever. This is like effing happening right now. And I like freaked out. And then I just looked up, and I would say I'm Jewish. I believe in God and spirit. And I said, I just know, God, you're going to like lead, everything's going to be okay. And you're going to lead me in the exact direction we need to have like happen. And I just remember thinking that, like, God is with me right now. And it was just a moment, because I said, holy, whatever, this is effing happening. And then and that's my fear. That's my fear brain. Right. And then I said, God, I know this is going to be okay. I know you're going to lead whatever's going to happen, whatever's supposed to happen. And it just switched to faith. And that's it. Yeah. And it wasn't like a conscious decision. It was like, it just happened. Because I had to get out of that. I had to get out of that fear-based model and mindset, and into trusting what was happening, because it was just going to happen anyway. So it wasn't like there's any stopping it.
Yeah, exactly. But leaning into that intuition a bit, because obviously too, your wife leaning into that intuition too, and that, I can birth this baby. Maybe I didn't want to birth in the Briarcliff complex, but here we are,
Yeah.
So
yes.
I love that. I think that the book will transcend, and I've said this multiple times, but the birth process itself. And it sounds like it's, use it at you preconceptively, and get into that mindset of looking at decision science and evaluating your values and your morals and all of that, and what's important to you. And then coming from that space and making decisions. I don't know. We're not taught that. We should have that in school. That should be a class in school.
Decision
Accounting,
science.
How to do your taxes, and decision science.
That's
because
right. That's
I don't know. I got a middle schooler, and I'm like, I don't know. I've never used that math before in my life.
I know. Not excited about that. Yeah.
All right, friend. Anything else you want to mention about the book?
No.
Yeah.
I'm just excited. I hope that, my hope is that it helps somebody, and it helps change our birthing climate is my hope, because we have to change that, right? We have to open up our eyes, and we have to change, because we're part of the problem, right? And so we've got to
That was the
change
other
that.
question I had kind of wrote down, because you said you wanted to bring education to the birthing community, but how is it failing us, and how can we change it? That's probably a whole topic for another show, but put you on the spot.
Yeah, right. I think maybe if providers got reimbursed more for better outcomes, maybe they would prefer that. I think maybe if just people looked into it more, did more research, and found like-minded providers, right? So I think that, I definitely think if providers were reimbursed with when they had better outcomes and less intervention used, that would change the climate completely. So
that's a big one. Because unfortunately, what drives
could be a driving
lot of the
force.
healthcare system.
It can be. I'm not saying it is, but it 100% can be. So I don't know if the providers are going to like my book, but I'm not put on this earth.
I'm just going to say, I don't think you came here to care about what a few providers think of you. And that's why we love you. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so where can people find you and connect with you? Because I know you're on social media and you have your office in Atlanta. So share all of that information with us, please.
So for my office, we are midtownfamilywellness.com. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Midtown Family Wellness, and TikTok. Not the best at TikTok, though. And then I do have another website, drdanielledrobbin.com. And that is for more like speaking engagements, where we're going to host selling the book. So that is more on a thought leadership side. But my personal practice is midtownfamilywellness.com.
Very good. Now, where can people find information about the book and like when it comes out and that type of thing? Is that more at DanielleDrobbin.com?
Yep.
Dr. Danielle Drobbin?
It'll be on both, but it'll be hosted on drdanielledrobbin.com.
Okay, good. So I'm going to link everything that you just mentioned. I'm going to put in the show notes there and have all the links so folks can go there, check you out, and follow you and have fun. So
awesome.
Thank you so much for being on the show and taking time, because, obviously you've got a very busy office, you have 4 children, and now you're writing a book. So you're like, why don't I just take some time out of my schedule and chat with me? But I do appreciate it. I love your energy and passion. And I have a feeling that you're making waves and going to change this birth community that is so desperately needing to change. So
thank you for having me and allowing me to share. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us on the Aligned Birth Podcast. We hope you found our discussions informative, inspiring, and enjoyable. Remember, when your body, mind, and intuition are aligned, you have the power to overcome any challenge that comes your way. We appreciate your support and leaving a review or rating, signing up for our newsletter, or becoming a direct listener supporter. Your contribution helps us continue delivering valuable content and reaching more listeners like yourself. Stay connected with us through our newsletter to receive the latest episodes and bonuses straight to your inbox each week. You can also connect with us on Instagram at aligned_birth. All links can be found in the show notes. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of the birthing individuals and new moms. Thank you for being a part of our community. We look forward to sharing more empowering conversations on the Aligned Birth Podcast. Until next time.